Hello, this interview is one in a series of interviews that Special Collections section of the State Archives of North Carolina is conducting with the American Indian Heritage Commission to record the lived experience of indigenous communities in North Carolina. These oral histories will be part of an archived series and will be made available to the public. Today is Thursday, November 2nd, 2023. It is just about 2:30 p.m. And this is an interview with, if you can give us your full name, please.
Okay, Marvel Andrea Welch.
All right, can you spell that for us?
Marvel. That's going to put me to the test. Andrea, Andrea, Welch, Welch.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This interview is being conducted for the American Indian Heritage Commission Oral History Project. The interviewer is John Horan. I have
Curry, Bird, Kerry, Bird. I'm the director of the North Carolina American Indian Heritage Commission.
And we also have oral history assistant Danielle Shirilla here. This video interview is being conducted in person at the North Carolina Museum of History in Raleigh, North Carolina. So we'll start with a pretty straightforward question. Can you give me your date and place of birth?
Oh my gosh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 6/20/59, Cherokee, North Carolina.
All right, appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And another easy, not question, but statement. Can you tell me about yourself?
Can I introduce myself?
Whatever you want us to know.
Okay. Shio Nagada, Anishinolade, Anishko Histi, G Squaw, Agazi, Judith French, Agidodo, Isaac Welch, Agaishi, Winnie French, Aginishi, William French Hawk, Dawesi, Cameo, Chi, and Rory. Hello, good day. My name is Marvel Welch. Anishko Histi means to wonder. So in the English language, that means marvel is to wonder. I am of the Bird clan. My mother is Judith French. My father is Isaac Welch. My maternal grandmother is Winnie Partridge. My paternal grandfather is William French Hawk. So my children are Cameo, Chi, and Rory. I said that in my language to honor my past, my present, and my future.
I really appreciate that. I'm this is a new experience for me in doing these oral histories, and I really appreciate the command of the language and the translation for us. And you know, we want to make sure we honor the past, present, and future. So, you know, if you'd like to give us a little bit more depth about yourself, I think that would be really great.
Okay. I'm one of 9 children of Isaac and Judy Welch. I'm the number 7, so number 7 is a favorite number for me. I have 5 sisters. I did have 5 sisters, and I've got 3 brothers. And I grew up in Jackson County, the Qualla boundary, which most people know as the Cherokee Reservation. My father worked for the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and my mother was a housewife. And I went to public school because since my dad worked for the government, his children were forced to go to public school instead of tribal school. So I grew up in the public school system until my last year when they kind of wavered on that decision, you know, government children had to go to state school. Well, I went to my tribal school, and I graduated in 1977 from Cherokee High School. Went on to college at Haskell Indian Junior College in Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas. You know how some teenagers are headstrong and want to make choices, so I lasted a year there and transferred to Brigham Young University. And being young and making some bad choices, we were talking about choices earlier, but I never finished. I quit school. So I went on and got married and had children, and when I was on or about 40 years old, I went back to college. I think I was ready to settle down, if you want to call it that. But I'm 64 now, so I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So, but I started my college at a local community college. I majored in human services and substance abuse technology. And during that time, I dabbled into criminal justice. And so as soon as I finished Southwestern Community College, I went to Western Carolina University and majored in social work and also criminal justice. So back in 2003, I went on to graduate school at the University of Tennessee and majored in clinical social work. And from there, I'll say I became a professional and became a child and family therapist. And what has brought me here today is all the changes and the choices I made during that time. I was speaking with Curry at lunch today, and we were talking about this. And whenever you go into social work, you kind of have to pick a track on which side you want to go, the clinical side or the administrative side. And my service was for Indian children. My passion is Indian child welfare. And a lot of that came from understanding my past. Like I said, when I spoke my language, I honored my past. All through life, I think I've been a learner of who I am as a Cherokee person. And it wasn't until 2013 that I retraced that trail of tears that my ancestors went on in the early 1800s. And having that experience and learning some of the challenges that brought my people to where they are today gave me a better understanding the past of who I am and what it has made me to whom I am today. And understanding all that, and like I said, I'm still learning. I told Curry that I felt like I was still a young one or a puppy still learning, and I hope to stay that way. And I just want to, what I have, to move it forward through my family and to the people that I meet. Whether it being a strong Cherokee person, because I think we're all strong in whomever, whatever culture or tradition that we're from. But to know what that is for yourself. So, but I think right now that's what has brought me here today. And I've got lots of stories. I think Curry has heard most of them already. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly the overview, and we're going to get into a whole bunch of those things. And even though Curry may have heard your stories, I haven't, so I want to hear them. As many as you're willing to share, I'm willing to listen to. And but I do want to kind of go back to growing up. Start at the beginning. Why not?
Okay.
And I'm interested to know. So, you were born and raised in Cherokee? Is that what I?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And so, what was growing up in Cherokee like?
In our younger years, the children stayed with the grandparents. That was pretty much the community raised the children. And my grandfather, he was well in his 90s when I was growing up. I had never heard an English word come out of that man's mouth. It was all Cherokee. And that was just our language. It was just who we are. That language was who we are as Cherokee people. Growing up, I thought everybody got up and went to the water every morning. And that's part of a daily ritual as a Cherokee. And so when I was growing up and had to go to public school, come to find out, everybody did not know that. And people did not want to know that. I wasn't in boarding school, but almost treated accordingly like it was boarding school. There was only very few Indian children that went to public school. And yeah, there was discrimination. There was learning, being colonized or assimilated, but I didn't know what that meant. I was wondering how come they took us away from something that was safe to something that was a huge change culturally wise. So, like I said, I went to public school most of my life, never losing that connection of who I was culturally as a Cherokee, but fighting against it with the people that were around me. If you want to call it discrimination, yeah, it was a learning experience. Learning the honor and respect of your elders. I mean, that was in the forefront. That wasn't even a question when I was growing up, except whenever I went to public school. I was punished a lot, and assumptions were made about who Indian people were. You get stories about, all Indians are drunks or, belligerent. And whenever I would get paddled with a ruler, she would say, "Your dad's nothing but a drunk." And I never knew my dad to drink. Never. And he was a pastor. And it was just like, and she would say that. And I thought, that's one of the things I always remember was being punished because my dad was a drunk. But going along with that, I didn't know any more or less. The treatment, I thought that's how everybody got treated. And it was not until I hit my last year, senior year, then I got to go to tribal school. I got to be with the people that I thought I knew who they were, and the discrimination was kind of even worse with your own people, because they would call me an apple Indian, meaning that you're red on the outside, but you're white on the inside. So, saying that, was I assimilated? I don't know. I asked a lot of questions, because I want to know. And that's probably what brought me into the field of the social sciences, because I wanted to know. Growing up, the sickness and the chronic diseases were rampant. And I'm older than my father, and I'm older than my mother. Whenever they passed on, they journeyed on. And it was just like, wow, I grew up thinking that I was going to die early, that 60 was going to be the tops, no longer. But as I mentioned earlier, my grandfather, he was in his 90s, and he was plowing us down outside playing games with us. And it was just like, and he really wasn't recorded to his true age, because, back at his time, you didn't get registered or have birth certificates, or, you didn't have that. So he was probably, I would say, at least 100 or older. And he was outside playing with us. He was outside going around the building trying to catch us. And if he caught us, he mowed you down. And I mean, it was just like, okay. And I thought, well, how come that my family, my mom and dad, couldn't endure what was happening to them? Because my dad was in boarding school. He kept running off. Finally, they just quit going after him, and, they let him go. And so whenever they had boarding school, you went long enough to learn a trade or a skill or whatever, and most of the time, that wasn't more than a 5th or 6th grade education, whatever you may call that. And they went back home and took care of the home. And my mother, 5th or 6th grade, but she loved to read. She knew how to read. And we had a little, they call them thrift stores now, but they had a service center at the church that we grew up next to. And she would get National Geographics. And she would read and read and read, and she would always say, Cherokee is just a small, small, small dot on this whole world. And she wanted us to know that Cherokee was bigger than that little small dot. And I appreciate growing up in that situation and in that life, because it did teach me that it was something bigger. But I also needed to stay connected to whom I was, because we have a lot to offer. Our culture and our tradition and our heritage, that is so much more. I mean, to me, it helped me learn more about other people. What makes us unique as a population? What makes us unique as Cherokee? What makes us unique as a German, or, different cultures? We all have something different, but we also have a lot to offer in a good way. And that was one of the things that my grandfather, before he passed, was, you want to live life in a good way. And one of the things that the social worker does is, do no harm to yourself or anyone else. And that's, to me, that's living life in a good way, making sure that you're doing good for everyone that you're involved with, that you cross paths with, that you will live this journey in a good way. Oh my gosh, I feel like I've been rambling.
No, I don't think you have been. I think it's I think it's really interesting to talk about the schooling piece, but I want to make sure I get a real sense of the town. Mm-hmm. and what was in the town growing up? How big was the town? Was there a movie theater, restaurants?
Oh my gosh.
Tell me all about that.
Well, if anyone knows anything about Cherokee, North Carolina, I would say, let's say 50 years ago. 50 years ago, it was a tourist town. A lot of craft shops, a lot of little where you could buy a bunch of souvenirs. We did have a museum. We've had an outdoor drama, but it wasn't really emphasized because people had that ideal of what an Indian was, and it was feathers and drums and hatchets and tomahawks and moccasins, and that's what they were wanting to see. Cherokee, in comparison, at 4 and 4:30, 50 years ago, you could roll up the sidewalks and it'd be dead. No traffic moving. We only had one store, one bus station, and like I said, 4:30, you could roll everything up because everything's going to shut down. And dirt roads, 2-lane roads, no casino. Like I said, it was just like no traffic lights. The valley I grew up in, you could see a glow coming up the valley, and it was a car. And you went to bed with the chickens. We didn't have power in my house or indoor plumbing till after I was 13 years old. And it was just like you went to bed with the chickens, literally, and you got up when the sun came up. And you worked. I mean, you may call them chores today, but it was work, And I always wondered how my dad grew rocks in a garden every year, because I thought we got them all. But every year, there was more rocks. I said, where did these rocks come from? It's one of those many questions that are still lingering. But you had, like I said, you call them chores, but you had things that you had to do. My mom, like I said, she was an at-home person, 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if you did not come at the dinner table, you got left out. Like I said, did I say that, I had 9 or 8 siblings? And we all sat at the table. We didn't have no TV. We didn't have no phones or cell phones. You ate together as a family. A lot of discipline that built your integrity and your character. Respect. Because there was no sass in your parents, none whatsoever. And I did get spankings, yes. By today's standards, I think my mom and dad would be in prison because DSS would have pulled them in because we got spanked. We had to even go and pick out our own switch. So, yeah. But that taught me respect and integrity. And I won't say it was written rules, but it was just the respect of your mom and dad. and how the family ran. I was never lonely. I was in between two brothers. And it was, I didn't realize that we were poor until I went to graduate school. And I had a professor say, "Oh, you came from that oppressed population." I go, "Excuse me?" I says, "So you're saying that I grew up in a poverty-stricken population and that we were oppressed?" I says, I didn't get everything that I wanted. I says, I got everything that we needed. I says, we got the love, we got shelter, we got food, we got that sense of belonging. And I said, you call that oppressed? And that was the kind of attitude that, how do you change that attitude with other people? Because, I could have been a different race. Would he have said that same thing to me? I mean, if I was white, would he have said that to me? Just because, yeah, he knew I was Cherokee, he tried to backpedal really quick and tried to apologize. And it's just like that assumption, he made that assumption. And I think that's one of the ideas that I want to change, meeting people and educating people about who we are as not only as Cherokee people, but a different, unique culture. And it's just like knowing who I am. I'm still learning who I am. And I hope every day that I'm still here, that I will still keep learning more and more of who I am. And like I said, our language, it teaches us how to live Cherokee. Because the meaning of the words are so much more than love. So we have a word that's called Gungayu. It means love. It means so much more, not just my heart is full of love with you. My heart and my spirit and my whole being is in love with whatever it is, the affection, the respect, and the honor of who you are as a person. That's what we mean whenever we say Gungayu. And so in the English version, or if you look in whichever dictionary, it's the affection of the heart. Is it not? I mean, that's what most people think. So in our language, that meaning goes so much further just in the first level. And understanding that, and understanding, the origins of who we are as Cherokee people are so much greater than what people know about us. And like I said, I want to educate people to a certain point, hopefully for them to open their minds up to see more than what they perceive. I don't know. Am I confusing you?
No, you're good. You're good. This is, it's really, it's great because I really like the way you tell us about yourself, and then you relate it to this sort of larger picture. So I'm really appreciative of that point. And I think this next question might lend itself to that. But you said that you did work. You might call it chores today, but you did work. I'm interested to know, there's eight siblings, or 8 of you total. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Did you each have a specific job, that this was your job, this was his job, this was her job, or did you kind of mix it up as you went? Was there negotiations that happened? How did it go?
Oh, no negotiation. There was no options. I think it had to do with age, because there was a set of 4, then 1, then another set, and there's like 10 years difference in the age, so it was age related. So by the time that I was growing up, 2 of the older ones had already moved out, and so you kind of moved into whatever their role was, or it was your turn to do the dishes, it was your turn, and everybody got out in the garden. Everybody helped with gathering. or foraging, or however you may gardening, you just kind of grew into that. And so we didn't have trash pickup, so it was your duty, the boys' duty, to go out, either burn the trash or bury it or whatever it is they needed to do to get rid of it. But there wasn't really a lot of trash. If I can think about it, no, there wasn't really a lot of trash. But if you call it women's work, yeah, my older sisters, by the time I was able to get up and do dishes, it was my turn to do the dishes. And like I said, it was like two sets of families, really. And so it wasn't your chore, it was just expected. Mm-hmm. You done what you needed to do. And you done whatever they needed to tell you to do. And I do have a funny story. We had wood stoves. Like I said, we didn't have power until we were like 13 years old, but still we had wood stoves. And me and my brother, we were only 17 months apart. We decided we'd build a fire before our dad got home so the house would be warm. We built a fire, all right. He had to get several men from the community to come help carry that that little stove out because it was glowing red. Because we had used a bunch of green twigs, and I mean, it heated up quick, and it was just like, but we were going to do that so our dad wouldn't have to build a fire when he got home. And we learned from then, no, you have to wait and let him do it because he would know how to do it right. And so, but yeah, it was just like, you done what was expected, and sometimes it was unwritten. It was kind of like you knew that, well, you need to do this without having to be asked. And it's not like that today. You kind of have to have a contract with your kids.
That may be true. I think that may be true. Yeah, when I used the word negotiation, I was wondering if it was between siblings, not between your parents had this is what needs to be done. Yeah. But I was just interested to know if there was like, well, you'll do this for me this week and I'll do it for that, and then none of that. All right.
No.
All right. Fair enough. In terms of fun now, you already mentioned your grandfather chasing you around the house. Mm-hmm. What other things did you do for fun?
Okay. We had the woods. They would tell us, don't go get on the grapevines. And guess what? As soon as we were out of sight, we hit the woods. That's the first thing that we seen, grapevines. And outside, I remember building or fixing my own fishing pole with a safety pin. And you use worms. Went out and dug some worms and got some string and put it on a stick. And me and your brother were just laughing. And we put it in the water, and it wasn't more than a minute or two. It started moving. And we caught a fish. That's what we done for fun. It was all outside. Picking berries and stuff like that, that wasn't fun. That was a chore. That's something that you had to do. Because seasonal foraging, like gathering greens and mushrooms and picking berries, canning, the gardening, all that was expected. So to me, that wasn't fun. But in the wintertime, there was a frozen pond, and we would make it our ice skating ring. We would stay outside, even though we'd be froze to death. We'd be outside and play on that ice all day long if they'd let us. Summertime, we stayed in the river all day long if we weren't in the woods. So, but like I said, we didn't have TV. We didn't have games that you played on the TV or anything like that. It was all outside. It was all playing ball, basketball, softball. My father was an archer, and we shot arrows. And it was, things like that. I mean, that was just part of growing up. That's being a kid. And I wish that I passed more of that along to my children about, enjoying what the outside has to offer you. And we call it doyiti, which means outside. It's outside learning. And I do have a daughter. She works at the new academy, Kadua Academy, and she's the language coordinator. And first place she takes all of her students is outside. So I'm hoping that kind of went that route to enjoying and appreciating what is here and not given.
No, that's, yeah. I mean, to be outside and you know, that's something that you learned growing up. And you mentioned that you maybe wanted to emphasize that more, but what is something that you did learn from your parents that you did emphasize in terms of your culture and your tradition to your children?
The gathering. I won't say I'm a criminal, but yeah, I am. Back in the early, in 2000, in that era there, I took my sisters to a gathering place that we had always gathered native greens. I don't know how much you know about federal law and the national park. You cannot pick anything in the national park. This place, we have been going many, many years. I took my mother, I took my other aunties and my sisters, and that's where we'd go and gather. And we have a native green that's called sochan. And there's another English name for it, which is about as long as my arm, but, you know, in Cherokee we call it sochan. And so, and every Indian woman carries a knife, maybe one or two other knives, but we carry one to forage or to gather. And I had a knife in my hand, and I was picking sochan in this hand. I had sochan in this hand, and we were at this place that we had always gone to, and park ranger walks up. He wasn't concerned that I had a knife in this hand. He was concerned what I had in this hand. And so he cited me. And at that time, I was working for the tribe as a child therapist. And I told the chief, I said, Chief, I will not pay a fine for gathering something that our people have gathered for thousands of years. I can't do it. And I says, I'm going to go to court. I am going to fight this. I may go ahead and get fined or whatever. I said, the point is, this is something that our people have done centuries long. So he agreed, and because we had to report any incident like that to our higher ups, and at that time, like I said, I was working for the tribe, and we went to federal court. We stayed in federal court for 2 years. I was fighting this, and my sister was fighting this because they charged her and cited her for the same thing. And it was foraging native plants out of the national park. And my daughter now has been on public TV talking about gathering sochan. And we also now today have an agreement with the National Park Service that we can gather and hunt certain things in the national park without getting cited. But that was something, that was the land that was there before the National Park Service was ever there. That's where we hunted and gathered. And so to me standing up for that right has passed on to my children and to whomever else was involved in all of that. And I had total support of our tribe, our chief, and the people at that time that were in the administration. So, and it was odd that the judge, you know, he says, so you've been foraging and gathering? And at that time, it was like 50 years. And I go, yes. And so, therefore, you know, he ruled in my favor and threw all of it out. So.
Well, in that case, then what you said at the beginning of this was you're a criminal, and I think that's not true. I think.
But I was in court.
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, all right. No, I really appreciate that story. That's great. So, you know, that particular tradition comes from, you know, your ancestry and your you know, being rooted in with the people who came before and were working together long before the National Park Service came. And I'm interested to know, you know, where does one learn these traditions and customs?
It was passed down to me through my mom, through my sisters, through my grandmother. It was, I want to say, I think it's innate in all of us to know that, is whether or not we connect to it. And to me, because that's what we survived on. We didn't have steaks and bologna and all that. I mean, we had to eat off the earth. And we were taught at an early age, you know, they take us out, and another story, side story, we would, as kids, take a frying pan, take chicken gizzards or chicken livers, and go up a little spring and get crawfish. And we would cook them right there on the side. And that, learning that or knowing that, you know, had been forever. And it was like gathering, picking berries and picking mushrooms and picking the greens at the different seasons, knowing the season that they come out at. That was, my mom knew that, her mom knew that, their great aunties and uncles, and everybody knew that. But to me as a woman, that was I was supposed to know that. And so what I know, I hope that I have passed that on, that interest on to my children and my grandchildren. And after that federal court case, and I told you they come up with a compact with the National Park Service, now they give you an orange gathering bag. So if a park ranger sees you picking something, it's okay because they're permitted. They're okay to do this. And it's only for the Cherokee people to be able to do that. And I took my granddaughter out 2 years ago, my youngest one, and she is in the Kadua Academy, so she's pretty much, I won't say she's fluent Cherokee, but she's pretty close to it. And I was showing her. I said, "This is So-Chan, you pick it like this." I kid you not, I did not have to wash her greens that she gathered because she picked them so clean. And it was just like, and she says, "Is this it?" And I says, "Yeah," because all you have to do is take it like this and smell it, and it has this smell. And she goes, "Because there's something else that looks just like it, but it doesn't have that smell." I says, "But if you're not sure," I said, "just pick it up and smell it." And I said, "That's what it smells like." She said, "Okay." And she got a whole bag full of stuff. And like I said, I practically didn't have to wash it to get it prepared. And that was another thing, too, is the preparing it. And because they have a speakers gathering and they have a dinner, and my daughter's always bringing me something to fix for that, some traditional foods. And she brought me a bear. And I love bear. And because she didn't know how to cook it. And I said, "Well, let me tell you how to cook it and what you have to get." And that's part of going out, we call it spicewood, to pull that gamey taste out of the bear. But you have to cook it like 24 hours, and it pulls it out. And I says, then you put your onions and your, hot peppers and stuff in it, And I said, you wouldn't tell it any different than a roast if you were to put it on the table. But she's learning that too. But also she's learning what greens, because part of her training for her group is you have to get out and you want to be willingly learn what are the native greens, the nuts and the berries and the mushrooms that you need to gather. And I mean, that's a whole new preservation that the tribal leaders said they put in place. We want to preserve this. And so me knowing that, teaching her, which I feel like I'm not the Yoda of teachers, I feel like there's other people that's more experienced and has more knowledge than that, and but she's learning what she knows from the other speakers too, in combination with what I'm teaching her. So I feel like it's going to carry on because that seed has already been planted in her, and that seed has been planted in my granddaughter. So she's going to want to know. And like I said, my granddaughter, another short story. I'm a grandma. I spoil her. I pick her up from school, and I always get her a snack. And I'll go, Shikonagay, Gigagay. Shikonagay is blue in English. Gigagay is red in English. So McDonald's has these frozen drinks. They got blue raspberry and the other one's cherry. So I asked her in Cherokee, which one does she want today? She goes, Mama, you know you have to speak English to them. They're not going to know what you're saying. So to me, she knows. She knows how to switch from Cherokee to English quicker than I would. So to me, she's learning. She's got it. And my daughter is getting it also. So to me, yeah, that influence has been passed down, and hopefully it will continue.
Yeah, but I want to move into a discussion of your education in a second. But I wanted to just make sure I asked this question. That plant that you're talking about gathering,
Mm-hmm.
what is its purpose traditionally?
It's a traditional green. A lot of it, if you use the juices off of it, it's an antioxidant. Very nutritious. It's got the vitamins, essential vitamins that you need. Also, the spicewood, you use that if a person is sick and they drink that tea, and it pulls that sickness out. And because everything has a purpose. There's a reason that you're pulling all this, combining or, to pull something out of it. And history tells us, and the stories tells us, that we learn a lot of the medicines and the foods from the animals. And one of the examples that I use is if anybody has a dog and they go outside, and if they're sick, what do? They go eat on a plant. So that dog knows that they need to be getting something from this plant for them to feel better. And our stories tell us that we even learn our language and our medicines and some of our practices from the animals. And like I said, there's a lot of stories that relates to all of that. And there's stories behind the mushrooms, a story behind the different nuts that you use. We've got traditional foods that you can't have this traditional food unless it's got this and this and this in it. And a lot of the nuts are, I won't say extinct, but they're very hard to come by anymore. Just like the traditional corn, the Indian corn, there's different ways that you have to fix it. There's different methods different protocols you have to have or put in place for it to come out the right way. And what I have seen today, and this is another thing that we have talked earlier about, is this new wave of generation, how it changes, how you take something away, you take something culturally away and you mold it into your own narrative. And maybe you might be losing something if you're taking it away and make it in your own. And you can talk about that like in medicine too. If it's not gathered and if it's not prepared and if it's not delivered in the right way, in the good way, then it's not going to work. and a lot of people don't want to see that. One of the examples I use that on that one is that there was a major medicine company that patented a medicine from an indigenous tribe because they seen a medicine man gather it, deliver it, and seen all these miraculous things happen to the person that was afflicted. So when they mass produced this, it didn't work. But that tribe couldn't use that medicine anymore because it was patented. So therefore, to fit their narrative, which didn't work, this tribe could no longer use that because it was patented by this company. And that has happened too often. You know, to fit your narrative, to fit your agenda, you know, it may not work. And so that's why I try to reiterate in my family and my passing down, you do it in a good way, whatever that may be in your definition. But, you know, this is how I was taught, and this is how your grandparents, this is how your past relations, you know, this is how it's come down to this point. So, and it's your choice whether you choose to go this way or go that way. And hopefully, you know, they go in a good way.
Yeah, hopefully they do. And something, that's a perfect segue for me to ask you about something you didn't have a choice in, it sounds like, and that's your schooling. You told me you might have preferred to go to the tribal school, but you were told you had to go to the public school.
Yeah.
Why?
Because my dad worked for the government.
What did he do?
He was in the BIA. He was in facilities management. And so one of the agreements was that, well, not really an agreement. It was just a known fact that if you work for the government, then you could send your kids to public school. And so, I mean, all the kids that their parents or family was employed with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, they went to public school.
And that includes all your siblings?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I know my brother that's next to me, he fought every day in high school because he was Cherokee, every day. And at that point in time, I think there was only like 11 Indian children in a population of maybe 600. And he fought every day. And I mean, he fought for me. And it was, I guess that reiterated being a passive Indian. It's just like, you know, if you don't stick your nose out there, then you're not going to get seen or heard or mashed on. So, but yeah. But that was a learning experience. And I encourage all the children or the kids that I have canceled in the past. I says, yeah, get your education. Go on and get your master's degree and go get your doctorate. And I says, everything that you have learned, I says, use it to help you and your people. I says, if you want to put it another way, use it against them. And I encourage education. I really do. And like I said, my mother, you know, she never had that education, but she liked to read, and she read the National Geographics. And I literally have been around the world because my mother said that Cherokee was bigger than a little grain of salt. And it was just like, and if I had, I can hear that every day. And I think my mom would be proud of me.
Yeah. So, you know, you said your brother fought.
Mm-hmm.
What exactly does that mean?
Physical altercations. You know, the words, those Indians. Well, I won't say the other words, but, you know, where's your moccasins today? Mm-hmm. And it was just like, oh, is she a squaw? Mm. But it was every day. It was every day.
And what about the learning side, the educational side? What about teachers, and did they have anything to say about it, or?
No. One of my siblings, she was put out of school because she talked back. I think he called her a damn Indian, and she said something back to him, and he put her out of his room. And at that point in time, our relative was the vice chief for the Eastern Band, and he came and picked her up and told the administration, because at that point in time, they got so much money for each Indian child they had in their system, and he says that easily can be taken away. So whatever funding they received, that kind of put them in check. They probably wanted as many as Indian kids as they could get in their system. And oh my gosh, how is that different from today? But yeah, she struggled. She's one of my older siblings, and she was in boarding school, and she's got some pretty interesting stories to tell. And I would say that our discrimination wasn't as in depth as hers was, and it might be the times, because she's ancient. I hope she don't see this.
If I have a younger brother, so I get the position here. But yeah, so was it you started in the first grade?
No, what do they call it, Head Start now?
Okay.
Because we had to go a couple of months, and we had to ride. I don't know if you know this or not, but there used to be an old car or old van they called a milk truck, and it was kind of round with a long front. I don't know, Curry, I don't know if you're that old or not, but anyway, they took out whatever was inside and put a roll of wooden seats around it, and that's what they went around to pick up the kids, and that's what we rode to school every day. And school was probably about 7 or 8 miles from where I lived in Cherokee, and that's what brought us home. But it was in Head Start. Like I said, we had to go earlier. I think I was like 4 years old, maybe, because I was about 4 years old.
And were your 4-year-old friends doing the same thing, or were they starting school later?
No. I think I was probably the only Indian in that group. Yeah. And it was so long ago, there was only, at the worst time, there was only 10 of us in one classroom.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And yeah, so when did the tribal school start? Was it also it wasn't a Head Start situation? So
I went to public school, so the tribal school had been there. It was a boarding school first, a day school, and then, the Cherokee Central schools, well, they would call that then, but it emerged from that. But to me, it's always been there. Mm-hmm. It was always there. I'd say late, maybe the 40s, 50s.
And what grades?
It went from... Well, the boarding school was, like I said, from from first grade to sixth grade, but how would you measure that? Mm-hmm. Because, like most of the kids really didn't go to school until they were like 7 or 8, 9 years old. And you were lucky if they stayed, and or some of them didn't stay, like my dad. And I'm surprised because, he got a government job and he didn't have a high school education. Yeah. So, and you wouldn't call it what you call math, science, and English. It was all trade. It was all skill. So, but yeah, my mom learned how to sew to be a mom. So, but where I went to school, Qualla Elementary, and like I said, at the 10 or 12 kids, and at that point in time, there were older going older, other kids were Cherokee, but they did not say they were Cherokee, but you knew they were because they wanted to be safe, keep it safe.
So that elementary school, and then you continued through in the public school system through high school, and you've kind of talked about the discrimination you felt and the discrimination your family felt, and do you have any positive memories of this time period?
The learning. I won't say I was smart. I won't say I was above I think I was an average bear. Some classes I was really intrigued with, history, but there was no Indian history. But I think what I wanted to know was more about whom I was as a Cherokee, because I could be who I was when I wasn't in school. I could be, I can hear my grandpa talking, the relationship, the family, that was good. But that was part of just growing up. And to me, you know, yeah, you had your moments, but family was, I knew that they loved me unconditionally and supported me in whatever I chose to do. Music, I love music. My dad was a singer. My dad learned how to play guitar. He just heard somebody playing, and he picked one up and started playing a guitar and singing. I can remember hearing the traditional songs. I can remember seeing ceremony, which you really don't talk about, and how they tell kids, well, when I was growing up, you know, your kids, you go outside and play, you know, don't bother the other adults because they've got things they need to do. And watching the ceremony from afar and knowing that was more so to who we were as Cherokee, those were the times that I remember that were good. And like I said, I never knew we were poor. To me, I think we were pretty rich. And I feel like, you know, my mom and dad, you know, they were good providers. And because that's what brought me here today.
And so you mentioned this piece about going to the tribal school for the last year.
Mm-hmm.
How did you swing that?
It was challenging. Like I said, you know, the discrimination, it was probably worse than with your own people. Because, you know, I was called an Apple Indian. The language and the studies was easy for me. And I won't say, I asked a lot of questions. I had one teacher says, "Why are you asking why?" And I says, "Why not?" I said, there's got to be more to it. And I think that's what led me to the social science field. But it was challenging, but it was family too. One of my biggest nemesis was a cousin of mine. And once one of the elders set them down and said, "You don't treat family that way." And the tides turn. The tides turn. And somebody I had never met my whole life stood up for me that first day. And he made sure that nobody else picked on me, and that he's the one that went and told the elder what they were doing, you know, my very own first cousin. And they set him straight. And it was just like, wow. And I mean, like I said, I didn't know him from Adam, and but he intervened, and we were the same age, and he became a very good friend after that. And it was just like, you know, that's not how you treat your people. And that's true. And I mean, to me, it took him, somebody I didn't know, to say that for them to hear that. And so therefore, and that's another thing too. We were only the few full-blooded Cherokees left. And it was just like, how can you call me an Apple Indian, because, I'm whole, I'm one. I'm not half or a quarter or 1/32. I'm full. I'm whole. And so how can you say that to me? And you don't even know me. But that goes into another rim of conversation when you talk about bug quantum. And it's just, it was good understanding, a good learning experience. And I did take away something. I wanted to take something positive away from that, but I think that's the only because I'm that kind of person, because negative always takes too much energy. And yeah, I have learned something through life. Don't ask me if I'd go back and do it again. Probably not, because I think I got what I need to get out of it. And hopefully I have made some good decisions for myself in a good way, and for my children, and for my future.
Yeah, that decision making is really, it's an interesting point that you're bringing up now, because I do you know why you switched schools?
I longed to have that connection to my community. I longed to, because you say, going to public school, major population at that time was white, a few black people, and a few Indians. And it was just like, there was no connection. Culturally, spiritually, there was no connection. And I think I was seeking seeking to belong. And to me, if I was back with my people, I would belong. And along with life's challenges, you have to go through those bumps to get there. And I can say that now. I might have been angry or hurt before, but I can say that from a learning experience.
And, the reason why you weren't there in the first place is because your dad worked for the government,
Yeah.
and there was the rule. There was a sort of maybe an unspoken rule, but
Mm-hmm.
a rule about go. How did he get around that for you?
I think at that point in time, things have changed. It was just like, I was ready. I mean, I was so scared to ask my dad. I was so scared to say, Dad, I want to go to the tribal school. And I was surprised, though. He said, okay. And it was, I just knew, like I said, I just wanted to connect. And my dad was the first speaker. I rarely heard him speak English. My mom was a speaker, but she never spoke English. She never spoke. And I heard the language all the time. And I was missing that. During that time, I was going to public school, hearing that, and the discipline. And it was just like the discipline was different. The interpretation was different. English and Cherokee were different. And how I comprehended that was different. And I thought, I don't belong here, I belong there. That sense of belonging. And I know it was part of being Cherokee. Living that Cherokee way in the Cherokee language. And that's that epiphany here. That's what has happened. I realized that's what it was. It was wanting to belong to who I am.
That's what we're all kind of hoping for, I think, for ourselves. So that sounds great. And you go from high school. You said you went to Lawrence, Kansas, right? Mm-hmm. That was directly.
Yes.
How did how did we end up here?
That was a culture shock. But Lawrence, Kansas, it's a all Indian junior. At that time, it was an all Indian junior college, and it was kind of that path. You know, you graduate from high school, you go on to college, and I don't think I ever got the chance to be a teenager, what they consider a teenager now. Never got that opportunity. I wasn't out there. We didn't go cruising or anything like that. Didn't go to the movies or anything like that. And it was just like, okay, college it is then. And Haskell Indian Junior College, like I said, was an all-Indian college. And going there was a huge culture shock because a lot of the Western Indians, they ate and breathed who they were. I had a roommate, she was from Unalakleet, Alaska, and she was a true Alaskan. I had friends that were true Navajo. They didn't speak English, they spoke Navajo. They acted according to who they were as Navajo people. And I thought, wow, that was kind of intimidating because I'm Cherokee and I feel like I don't know what that means. And so I spent a year there. I was into music. I traveled a lot of that year with the Indian Honor Band. We traveled quite a bit. And so therefore, there wasn't a lot of interaction within the campus itself, campus life. And I guess that wild hair got a hold of me. And I came home for the summer, and it was, I'm free. I'm an adult. And so I decided not to go back to Lawrence, Kansas, and I went to Brigham Young because there was an agreement with the tribes that, you know, send your Indian kids to these schools because they will take your kids. And so whenever I went to my guidance counselor, he says, go to Brigham Young. I mean, that wasn't even an option. He's an option for yes or no. He says, you're going. And so whenever I went out there, you know, it was another culture change. Huge culture change. Trying to conform again into their belief, trying to assimilate into their belief was just like overwhelming. Being a teenager and being an adult and having a mind of your own and trying to conform into something that is totally foreign to you. And it was just like, okay. But they revere you as a Lamanite, which was the indigenous population. And it's just like, why do you do that? Why are you putting us up on a pedestal? And do I have a right to be on that pedestal? Because I'm not sure what it means to be Cherokee. And so that didn't last very long. So, and it was just like, okay, I'm going to go back home, get married, have kids. That's just how it's going to be. That's what it's destined to be. And so, and like I said, it was about 40 years old is whenever all that tide changed and I went back to school.
So, okay, so then if I get the timeline right, you're a year in Kansas and how many in? Not
even quite a year at BYU.
Okay, so you're about 20 years old maybe when you decide to?
I graduated when I was 17. I started college when I was 17.
Okay,
so
I
was 19.
Mm-hmm. All right. 19 years old when you decide to come back. Mm-hmm. And when you do decide to come back, you know, we're talking now as if it was just sort of you decided, you came back, and you got married. But there surely was like things you had to do to make it happen, right? That it wasn't just right off of.
It was that wild hair.
Yeah, but so explain that a little bit.
Well, it was just trying to find my place where I was supposed to be in society at that age, an adult. And at that time, I think my parents both were getting down because, like I said, there was chronic diseases rampant and continue. diabetes, and I think my dad went through several strokes, and at that time, and it was almost, okay, it's my duty here now is to help take care of them, plus, having your own life. And at that point in time, I got married and had my first child and everything, and it was just like in taking care of my parents. And then whenever he, succumbed to his illness, then my mother didn't last very much longer after that. And I'm older. I'm actually at the same age and older whenever all that happened. And it was, my gosh, you're going to have to grow up. And what is it that you want for your children? And so that's whenever, at that point of being 40, I thought, okay, if I'm expecting my children to be successful or have, life in a good way, I'm going to have to do it myself. And so therefore I went back to school. And I encouraged them to get their education too.
Yeah, and before we completely move into this time where we're going to talk about your college and beyond the master's degree and all that, I just wanted to see, your parents, did they have an expectation of you to go to college? Did they have an expectation of you to stay home? Did they have any sort of thing like that?
I think my mom planted the seed for me to go further than that. You remember when I said that you could roll up the sidewalk in Cherokee around 4 and 4:30? It's not that way today. And every time I walk down or go down that street, I says my parents would not know this place. They would never know the challenges and the changes and that our tribe has been going through and how we've grown. My dad, they were the unspoken, I won't say governing people, but they were the go-to people when decisions had to be made. And it was just for the tribe, and he was part of that. He was a big part of that. My grandfather was a big part of that. And it was just like, they wouldn't know who we are today. They wouldn't know, the different and evolving challenges that face the people today. And like I said earlier, this new generation of thinking about how you're taken away from this space and bringing it back to yourself and making it into your understanding, into your own narrative. How that has changed from 60, 70 years ago. And because, life does change, society changes. My dad probably would not know what a cell phone is. My mom would know, the remote channel. We were the remotes when we did have a TV. Change it to this channel. Or go turn the antenna. Stop. And you had to stand there and hold the antenna because if you let go, the signal would go out. And it was just like, they would know that. And when we went to school, if we missed that bus, we walked to school. There was no taxi. There was nobody to take you. But if you got in trouble at school, you better believe when you got home, you got the same thing. If you got a spanking at school because you done something bad or whatever, you got a spanking when you got home. And like I said, my mom and dad probably in prison because we got spankings and we had to go get our own switch. Yeah. But it's just, my parents, I think my mom had the foresight to know that, and she planted that seed with them National Geographics. Because every place that she's ever read to us or she let us read or look at the pictures, I think I have been to every place.
Wow. Yeah, so it's not, maybe it's not like, hey, you're going to college, but it's more like, hey, look at this, which then sparked you to say, I'm going to go. Okay, that's really good. So, when you are, in that time of life where you're looking at going back to school, you're looking at going back to college and getting the degrees, What did you choose, and how did you come to choose it?
I think it comes back to the historic grief and trauma. Seeing and working with people, because we had illnesses in our communities and they really weren't addressed, but they were taken care of by the community. If you say it now, it was mental health issues, but the community took care of them. And to me, I wanted to give back in the sense of not the cure-all, but helping them through their struggles and the challenges. Because, I've had a couple mentors that have been right there with me. Sometimes I felt like they had to drag me, but show me open your mind up, go approach it this way. Here are the options. And that's one thing I probably never had in my life was options. Because it was just like, you get married. If you're not going to go on to school, then you get married and have kids. And that was just pretty much set in stone. And so, and like I said, I wanted more for my kids for me to go on back to school. And I think my mom sparked that. And my dad wasn't high school educated, but he was a provider and he was a good supporter, and he was one of the pillars of the community because people looked up to him for his advice, for his guidance. And so being that, growing up in that way, in that sense of community, our tribal community, off of kind of another tangent here, what COVID done was it made us go back for all families to sit down at the table together. COVID made us stay in to be around each other all the time, for us to be families again. And that's what I remember, and that's what I want for me and my family, for my future, to know that that's family. Even though education has taken me around the world, education has also taught me the importance of your community and your people and about who you are. And so, therefore, that is a big part of who I am today, that I feel that my parents instilled in me, to honor that.
Well, it's as if you had a copy of my questions here, because I was going to ask you about your mentors, and I'd be interested if you would mind naming a few and telling us what they did for you.
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think one of the first things in Social Work 101 is that make sure you have a group of people that you can go to. And I have go-to people everywhere, in every corner. Professionally, he's deceased now, but his name was Mickey Strother. And he actually gave me my first therapy job. And, of course, you have to have supervision once a week. And first thing that he says to me, I put the issue at hand. And he says, well, what do you plan to do about it? I thought, well, that's why I put it on the table, so you could help me with it. and that was and that has stuck with me forever. I also had a professor at Southwestern Community College, name of Tim Quiring, and he was a huge supporter. And he is also gone today. And he would always say, Marvel, he said, you've got good ideas. He said, but it's going to take more than this AA degree to get there. And so when I got my AA degrees, I went on to Western Carolina University and got my social work and criminal justice degree. and started work. And I thought, I had a pie job. I worked with juvenile services. I loved it. Working with kids, challenging at times, or most of the time. And so I had a boss. She came down and she says, Myrtle, she says, you've got some good ideas about development and everything. She said, you're going to have to go on back and get your master's. And I go, well, I'm okay where I'm at. She says, you got some good ideas. She says, why not let them build on your ideas than someone else taking those ideas and building on them? I said, okay. And so I got accepted at University of Tennessee. And they give you a choice whether or not you want to go clinical or administrative. And I chose clinical because I like working with children and adults and, well, families. And went through that whole course load and was kind of intimidated because it was like, why are you telling me that I have to have this piece of paper to do what I've been doing for the past couple of years? And I kind of bucked at that, and some of my papers even reflect that. And it was just like, okay, so got to turn that mindset. Okay, learn as much as you can, because there's some things right here that you can use to help your developing ideas. And so when I graduated and everything, like I said, Mickey Strother gave me my first job, my child and family therapist job. And his supervision was, what is it that you're going to do about it? What is it that you're going to do to help them? And those were very profound words. And that's some of the words I use today whenever I see someone and say, okay, what is it that you're wanting to do? Especially when it came to assessing. And one of the biggest things was culturally appropriate approaches. Because, you've got the different theories that you have to learn in school, and they don't quite work in Indian country. One of the main ones that I use as an example is in assessment, they ask you if you hear or see things that nobody else can hear. And I thought, that's not a very good question because, Indian people and Indian culture, there are things that you can see and things that you can hear that are normal, in my world, are normal, culturally acceptable. And I says, why don't we change this around and ask this question? I says, has any of those images or voices told you to do something and you done it? I said, so let's strike out that question there and turn it around to where it would be able to tease that other out. And I says, because if you ask that, I says, that's how come some people don't answer that question. It's because they do, and if they put down that, yeah, they see and they hear things, okay, let me call 911 and get you, committed here. And I said, no. I says, because you're doing a big injustice. And so, therefore, when I was in graduate school, that's one of the things that we were trying to get a client committed. And they were 2 weeks shy of being an adolescent, which they were latent. And the closest place was 8 hours away. So we're trying to take a child out of trauma. And I said, no. I says, you're going to take this child out of trauma and put them in another trauma 8 hours away? Nope, that's not going to happen. So from going from the clinical, then I had to go to administrative. And that's what put me on the political rim of things in social change. And it was just like, okay. So, and that's what has brought me here today.
we'll talk about the political realm of social change, as you just said, in a second. I just want to make sure I get this understanding. When you were when you were discussing that question and reframing that question that you just talked about, what was the what was the setting? What was the audience? Who were you debating it with? Was it for a specifically Indian situation, or was it okay?
Yes.
But was it with other?
No.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's the deal on? Was it with white folks, multicultural, or what's going on there?
That was a good discussion point. Whenever I said I kind of bucked at the system, I said, yeah, you're giving me some good tools for my toolbox, but it's not the right color toolbox. And that's as simple terms as I could put it. I said, what you say will work in I won't say normal situation. I won't even say white situation. I said, this will not work with the people that I would be working with. And that meaning my people. And not just my people, but pretty much any Indian across the board. I says, because they're different. And I says, to me, that part of learning the population you're working with is so important. And I says, because if you don't adapt or learn what that is, that history of, I says, then you're going to go in and you're going to probably do something that's going to not be so good. I says, you're going to do more harm than good.
And how did they receive that?
Well, as anybody that has to go by these protocols and policies, they understood, and they kind of leewayed in a sense, and how they graded, but they worked with me. I had one really good professor at UT that encouraged the different aspects. He even gave me extra readings, like different cultures and how they dealt with death and dying. And he says, read this. And he says, it'll give you a better understanding in different other ways. And he says, this would help your toolbox. Because people would not want to hear about our processes of death and dying. And it was something I probably wouldn't share with anyone. The ceremony that you have to go through. And they would not understand that. And so therefore, he knew, he had the insight to say, okay, I will help her this way to learn how they want you to write. And says, once you do that, then get through all this, jump through all the hoops, get that piece of paper, and then you can officially change in how you operate and the people that you dealt with. And that did happen, because my 4 walls were not 4 walls like this. It was anywhere that child needed to be, whether it be outside, the water, or, it wasn't the normal therapy session in the 4 walls. So there, I said, get your education. Use that for the people that you serve.
Mm-hmm. And so were you able to combine the clinical with the administrative?
No. I miss clinical. Well, I don't do very much clinical anymore, and I don't do much social change anymore. I'm at my point in my life that I have to take one day at a time. And so I want to enjoy what I can do while I still can, and I don't take a lot of big projects on because I want to see them through, but maybe I may not be here to see them through. And I don't know if I want to share that or not.
We can talk about something else for a second.
Okay.
You mentioned the political realm. What did you mean by that?
An advocate of social change. Once I got into the administrative part of it, some of the leaders of the tribe felt like I could serve on different boards and commissions for that change. Like I said, my passion is Indian child welfare, or any children. I said, it doesn't matter what color or creed they are, I will help any of them in any, that's in a good way. And so, therefore, whenever I got involved with the Commission of Indian Affairs, they put me right on the Indian child welfare, and I just took off with it. And it was one of the social changes that we have changed a little bit, definitions here and there for the state of North Carolina. I mean, they're not huge changes, but they're changes that have made a mark. And
Do you have an example?
Yes. What do you think of whenever I say kinship? Kinship placement in social services meant that, a family member. Okay. We changed that definition to mean anyone that has a relationship with that family, whether it be school, community, church. Don't have to be blood tied. But in Indian communities, kinship is everybody. Kinship is not only by blood, it's by interaction. And so that's one of the little things that we have changed here in the state of North Carolina, and I'm hoping there are more changes. And I'm helping a young lady right now, hopefully, to have some more changes made. And so, but like I said, it's not an overnight resolution. If you know anything about government, it's very, very slow. It's not fast enough for me. And one of the biggest challenges that we have was a decision that the Supreme Court made, and it was back last year about Indian child welfare. Well, the first of the year, about Indian child welfare and about its existence, because of all the political realms and the stories and the levels of what Indian child welfare is. And I mean, there's a whole history of why there is Indian child welfare, and it's something that I feel that was one of the reasons I'm here, and that was one of the reasons to help my community. And when I say my community, I'm not just saying Cherokee. I'm saying my Indian community, to help make a change. And being on that commission for the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs, it has taught me a lot. And I have made many relations. And hopefully we can see a better place for our future for the American Indian people here in North Carolina, the child and families. And so, yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I wanted to know how you got into the political realm, and I think that was exactly the answer that I'm looking for. And so let's give a timeline. You're about 40 years old when you get started. When did you finish school?
I graduated from UT in 2005.
Okay, and then you did clinical from there, and then administrative after. So what are the two?
I won't say administrative, because I came out of child and family therapist into the school system for a year. Then I went back for my doctorate program.
Okay.
And so therefore I kind of I have been stuck there. It's the only thing I have control of right now. I'm sitting on my dissertation for my doctorate, and I'm choosing not to go further with it. I have been diagnosed with a chronic disease, and I've told Curry that my life expectancy has already passed 2 to 4 years, and I'm on my 5th year.
Wow.
So that's how come I said I don't really like to plan out too far. So it's just what I can do today, I'm going to do today.
Sure. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, and then, kind of going back to something you talked about, we talked about at the beginning, and that was, you're giving your tradition to your future in the form of your children and your grandchildren. Is there something that they've left behind?
What do you mean they left behind?
So something that maybe was part of your growing up, your tradition, your culture, that maybe that is not so much part of theirs. Can you rephrase that? Well, I'm just looking for sort of change in cultural change. because the next question I'm going to ask you about is something to do with what you said. Your father and your grandfather were pillars of the community, and if something needed decided, or they would go sometimes to your father, your grandfather, to make decisions. Now the tribal structure is different, and they might not have recognized it. So I was going to ask you, how had it changed over time? Similarly, that's big picture tribal. Now I'm kind of going in for
Okay.
personal.
Okay. Just with my family, I know, because I'm not the oldest one that's surviving in my family. So my children know if I can't answer it, if they feel like it may be overload for me, they'll go to my older sister or my older brother. And I feel like they're at a good point where it's okay if they don't ask me, because they know they can go another route to get that answer. If not, then they can come to me, or we can work it out, or we can find it. If I don't know it, we can find it. We can find an answer. And it's just like, it takes me back to the story I told you earlier about my granddaughter getting in the water. Because water is very powerful in Indian country. And her knowing that she needed to stay in that water, and me telling my daughter that she had to stay with her, because I didn't want her floating down the river, but but to be there for her support, like I was there for her support. So I won't say that she hasn't taken that away. I mean, that has changed. She's still going to carry that on. And my daughter seeing that, she will carry that on too. Because reason I know that is she made application for Remember the Removal Ride, which is the retracing of the Trail of Tears. And one of her reasoning was she remembered and recalled what all happened on one of the trips, on one of the support trips with me. And she said she knew the challenges and the struggles that the riders had, because our past relations went through the same things on a different level. And so to me, she got that. And she was willing to go through that challenge herself, knowing that she was going to be faced with, some decision making and, understanding her past. And my granddaughter, she's blonde haired and blue eyed. And so she has been told, well, you're not Indian. And I said, this girl's more Indian than anybody full blood will ever be. And to me, that has been passed on. And to me, she has gotten that seed too, to want to know. And she knows that she belongs more than just to her Cherokee ways, but to her father's ways too, because her father's Caucasian. So she has a connection. And like I said, in today's world, there's a lot of disconnect, not only with Indian people, but, other cultures too. And so therefore, I hope that seed has been planted for her to stay connected.
I was going to talk about the tribal structure now, but I didn't. I should have said the ride you took. Do you want to talk about that with a little bit of detail there?
Okay. I said my daughter Chi. We decided back in 2012 that we were going to apply to ride together. And so you have to go through this interview process, and there was a lot of not knowing, what to expect. And so when we went through the interview process, Chi was chosen. And so I chose to help be her support. And she took the ride. It was a 21-day journey. and over 900 miles. So the next year, I applied again, and I got chosen, not knowing what to expect. So when I was training, I was hurting, running, cycling, and I thought, well, I cannot stop, because my people endured so much more. And so that kept me going. So every day when we left from New Echota, Georgia. Every day I asked our past relations to watch over us, to be there, to be safe. And and we went to the water every morning, something that I'd done with my grandpa. I thought everybody done that. And asked for a good day and asked our pastor to watch over us. So I was asking my grandpa to watch over us. And every day there was always a sign. Even though it was hard, cried every day to go on that trail that my people suffered on. To hear the stories that they had to thaw the ground out and they didn't bury them individually. They buried them in mass graves. And to hear and to learn that it was the first concentration camp. To be on that ground, it was like walking on hallowed ground. To feel those emotions of the fear and the hurt of my past relations. That was every day. And to grow a bigger appreciation and honor and respect for my people, who they were. With my head down, I would pray. I would say, just watch over us, because I was so tired. There was a little girl that stayed with me from my first petal to my last. And she was from Cherokee Nation, and she was also of the Bird Clan, which I am. And my daughter says, Sarah, she says, just watch over my mom, take care of my mom. And she did. She did. And we were riding up Cumberland Gap. Cumberland Gap was supposed to be the hardest day because you're doing like an 18% grade for a couple miles. And it was raining. It was raining hard. And my people were removed in the dead of winter. And I had my head down, and I couldn't tell if I was crying or if it was just all the rain. Sarah was always on my tire. I mean, she was just like right there, and sometimes she would bump me. And we got up to the Cumberland, and something like this happened every day. And I was praying. I was praying to our past relations, just watch over us, just get us there safe, because I didn't know how far we were going. And back on the Trail of Tears, they didn't know how far they were going either. They didn't know if they were going to go 500 feet. They didn't know if they was going to go a mile or if they were going to go 10 miles. And they didn't know if they were going to have anything to eat. And I had my head down, and that was what kept me going. And I was praying, and it was toward the end of the day, and it was raining hard, and I put my head down, and I stopped. I stopped pedaling. Going up the grade, my bike was still going. I put my head down, and I said, Sarah. She goes, I know. And as soon as it got us to the knoll there, it went down like that. She was right on my tail, and I was a-crying. And when we got up to the next knoll, there was the rest of the team. They were all standing there. They were laughing. They were crying. We were all crying. And And it was just like we knew that our past relations were there and they carried us through, and that was every day. And to me, that's what has been passed on to my daughter and to my granddaughter, knowing and you understanding your past of whom you are and who you are. That's what's going to keep you here, and that's what's going to push you forward. And so that whole experience has gave me a better understanding who I am as a Cherokee woman, what my past relations had to endure. And I will carry that hurt. I will never forget. And that's one of the things that's our mantra, never forgetting. And that's what I hope to pass on to my future generations, to understand. Never forget, but understand who you're from, who your past relationships are. And that's why in my language that I remembered my grandparents, because they're a big part of whom I am. And it's just like, I would recommend anybody to know that who that is, like who you are. What culture do you come from? What is it that you believe? What is it that your past relations endured for you to be here today? So that's in saying that, I think I answered your question.
Yeah, you did it. I mean, with such emotion, and it's touching. And I asked you to tell me about your ride,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what you did.
Mm-hmm.
And you did it with, I mean, just extraordinarily. So I really appreciate that. I think at this point I'm going to see, Curry, do you have any questions you'd like to ask? No, all right. Well, if you think about it, I'll come back to you in a second. I'm going to ask you about the tribal structure.
Mm-hmm.
I did mention earlier that we were gonna. I wanted to talk about this, and over your lifetime, the tribal structure may or may not have changed. And if it has, and I'm sure it has, but how much? I'd like you to tell me.
Wow. Yes, it has changed. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, it was an honor and a respected position to be a tribal representative. And you're talking early 1900s, you're talking early. And a lot of the clans govern a lot of the things that the community's done. When I talk about clans, I'm talking about communities. And a lot of them, they call it unwritten laws, clan laws. And they would take care of, we didn't have child abuse. We didn't have domestic violence because the clans took care of that. You honored and you cherished, your women and your children. And respected each other. And so, therefore, a lot of that was taken care of through the communities, the clan system. So when tribal council came along, people, it was a respected position to make the best decisions you can for our tribe. And by today's decisions they have to make is way far than what it used to be. Because tribal council, it wasn't a paid position, it was a respected position. And now, today, it's a very high-paying position, and because the Eastern Band is, a multi-million-dollar business. And so the structure has changed quite a bit. The chief, council, they work hand in hand in the best interests of our tribe. And of course, in any political arena, you have your naysayers, and that's not good, and and you have your people that have good intent. And so yes, the structure has really changed a lot. If you look at the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, you would say, as we were a sovereign tribe, we could actually be a state within the state of North Carolina, but we choose to work with the state of North Carolina, a good neighbor, a good community. And so I would say the tribe probably has changed drastically in the past 25 years because of the gaming issue, the gaming revenue. The Eastern Band by no means is entitled. I think our struggles and our challenges from our past, have brought us where we're at today. And I feel like in any political realm of things, our leaders, some have bad choices and some have good choices. But our tribe has grown. Our tribe has really grown. And in a good way in some ways and not so good in other ways. And that's just government everywhere. And so we just had a new tribal election. Michelle Hicks is our chief now. He was our chief several years back. And so just ready to see what's going to develop from that because, it's all of our chiefs have always grown our tribes. I mean, regardless of who they are, and they've always grown our tribes and have held the best interest of our tribe. And we also, the tribal council still also respects the elders because we have an elders council, and they respect and go and ask their opinion. And most of the time, it's they go the way the elders wanted them to go. And that's only good practice for them as tribal members or tribal council. And you would hope that, I don't know what you would call that. I mean, the elders council, because they govern a lot of things that happen in the community too. And with the revitalization of our language and everything too, that community is getting a lot stronger, which it should be. Because it's, like I said, the Speakers Council, they teach how we're supposed to be as Cherokee people. And so, I don't know. I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so in this interview, we've kind of focused on your life story and your family story. We just did a little bit of an expansion, broadening to talk about the Cherokee and the tribal structure there. Going as big picture as you can, what do you think the most pressing need is for American Indians in general?
Connecting who they are. Because I see a big disconnect, culturally wise. If we want to use the example of here in North Carolina, it's just connection. I think the seed are there, but it's not like it's connecting. I see a big disconnect. I see when I said earlier about going into a realm of things and taking away and making it your own narrative, then you're taken away from what it originally set to be. And I would hope that the younger people, and I've seen some older people, have that in mind. Be mindful and respectful. And find out who you are. I mean, what is it to be Wakamasuan? What does it mean to be Lumbee? What does it mean to be Mahiran? What is it? What is it that makes you who you are? And that's one of the questions that I asked, because when I first came on the commission, because I wanted to go to every community. And I wanted to find that connection because, in Indian country, you go into any community, you connect. You have a connection. I mean, it may not, that person or anything, but you connect with them in some way or another. And so I done that. And it was enlightening. And it was just like, okay, that's cool. That's cool. And that's not too far off in how we believe either. It was just like there was some connections made. And but I would like to see it on a bigger scale. But that's just me. People can choose to or not.
Well, I'm just asking you, so that I appreciate that. And so now that was the big picture. Let's get back to the what's the most pressing need for the Eastern Band of the Cherokee?
There's several things. Let's see. You know, with gaming, there's some good things and there's some bad things. It has developed a lot of tribal programs, some social programs, and I feel like some of our younger people are losing sight of. Because to me, the casino's here today, but it could be gone tomorrow, and you're banking on that per cap every 6 months. Like I said, it's here today and it's gone tomorrow. So what are you going to do? How prepared are you if that per cap's not here tomorrow? And I would like to see it more so in the revitalization. I mean, we've got a huge program now that's revitalizing a lot of the cultural and heritage systems in our tribe. But to me, if we lose sight of that, then what are we losing? Have we gone so far that we have forgotten how to be Cherokee? I mean, I don't know. That's a question. Can we answer that question? To think that way, to live that way, to give back that way. Have we lost that? But to me, that's the questions I ask from anyone. And I see that. I would hope that they would want to reconnect, because I think it's innate in any culture to connect to it. And if we can just tap into that and plant that seed, hopefully they would want to know that. So I see that. I don't want our language to die. And I know they say that we only have 200 some other first speakers, but they don't tell you the number of speakers that are in training, which is a lot more than that. And I says, the thing about it is, if you teach them, and it's a hard language to learn, I says, but don't lose the meaning of what it means. And I says, don't interpret it what you think it is. I says, your teacher, I says, your elders, they will help you. And so to me, it's that reconnection, or making that connection stronger.
Great. Well, Curry, no? All right. No? Okay. So then, in that case, I will kind of wrap up and ask you what you're most proud of, or what has been your biggest achievement.
Oh, wow. Life. I think being where I am today, all the paths that I have crossed, the people, the relationships, I said it earlier, I wouldn't go back and change a thing. Living in each moment to the mostest. And hope that it continues in the future. That belief for my children, my grandchildren, future grandchildren, great-grandchildren, future generations. I think where I am today, and that hope. Yeah.
All right. Is there anything you would like to add to this record while we have it open?
Can it be used against me? No. No. I have, we've got a word. It's called Hadegadagahoya. And it means until we meet again, because we don't have goodbyes in this world or in the next one. So that would be my lasting words. Hadegadagahoya.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.